back to the quote, when it's talking about the fear of freedom, it kind of took me back to this other quote. It says, man is condemned to be free because once thrown into the world, he's responsible for everything he does.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Well, what I wrote for this one is kind of like, once thrown into the world, like, the person is responsible for everything they do. So like mankind itself is forced to be free when they grow up. So like the fear of freedom is like the fear of growing up, the fear of having responsibilities. And that's where the consequences come in.
I remember almost throwing up one time when I found out I grew up. Because it hits you like a ton of bricks where it's like, holy crap, I'm an adult. How did this happen? Who let this happen? Who put me in charge? Oh my God. Yeah, and by the way, it's broader than just that. It isn't even just that you're responsible for the things that you do. You're also responsible for everything that you don't do. And so that creates this overwhelming level of responsibility for us where every little action is it's a significant action. I mean, even you can get to a point where you can get to a crosswalk and it says don't walk, where you can stand there, look at that sign and say, I should not walk. That's a moral decision. In other words, even something as small as that. I mean, by the way, I mentioned that because I'm thinking, so let's say that you intend to do something good. You intend to do something good. And then you do it, and something terrible comes from it. So, I mean, something silly like, let's say that there's an old lady and she's crossing the street. She's going very slowly and she's concerned. So you say, I'm going to go help this person. So you step out there, you help her, you get her across the street even faster. And then because, she gets to the corner, she stops, she says, thank you so much. I wouldn't be right here if it wasn't for you. And you're like, no problem, I'm a good person. You pat yourself on the back. And as you're doing that, a person on a bicycle is not paying attention, jumps the curb, runs into her, and kills her.
Oh, shit.
Right. And she just got done telling you, I wouldn't be where I am right now if it wasn't for you. And it's true. She wouldn't be. And you pat yourself on the back and took full credit for this. Are you responsible for her death in some way? It's uncomfortable to be like, yeah, like a lot of things in life, right? Hear me out. Yes, I'm responsible, but hear me out. I got something to say about that. And that's where intentions start to come into it. So when someone says, like, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, and we still get mad at them about that. I don't know. Is that different than if someone says, oh, I meant to hurt your feelings. I wanted to ruin you with that. Somehow the first one, we don't really take too much of it into account if someone doesn't mean to hurt us. And that's because it hurts just the same. If someone didn't mean to get us run over by a bicyclist, we're still run over by a bicyclist. And so in a way, it feels like we're responsible for everything that we do, and we're also responsible for everything that we don't do. And there's a terror that's attached to that, because then you're responsible for how things turn out. If instead, there's the old lady crossing the street, and I'm standing there, I go, hey, dude, help her out, man. Help her out. And you're like, oh, okay. And then you help her out, and then she says, I wouldn't be where I was if it wasn't for you. And you say, well, I wouldn't have had you do that if Scanlon hadn't told me to. And then you're mid-sentence, she gets run over by a bicyclist. Now it's like, dude, but he told me to. He was the one who had me do it. Now you're no longer responsible for that. So far, so good? Now, everything plays out exactly the same. She gets to the corner and she says, thank you so much for helping me. And you say, well, it wasn't really so much me, it was Scanlon who had me do it. And she's like, okay, thank you so much. And then she goes about her day. Or better yet, I don't know, we'll make it extreme. She gives you $100 and she said, just for being a nice person. And then you take that $100 and you're like, wow, and you give it to me because I'm the one who told you to do it, right? So now you don't get credit for the good thing that you did either. So you don't get credit for the bad thing that you did. You also don't get credit for the good thing that you did. You don't get credit for anything that you do in life. So I guess now the question becomes, what does it matter if you do anything at all? That's the dichotomy. That's the challenge. You're either responsible for everything that you do in life, and then you're responsible for everything you do and everything that you don't do, or you're responsible for nothing in life, in which case you don't get any of the benefits associated with it either. You don't get the harm or the good. And so I guess it's a question of which life do you want to live, the ones in the middle or the one that down here.
It sounds like you're describing gambling.
Explain.
Because you're like, hey, you see if I bet, you know, all my money on blackjack, 21, let's go, and then I don't get it, and I'm like, oh. But then, man, 99% of gamblers quit right before they hit it big.
Right? That's saying exactly perfect. 99% of gamblers quit right before they hit big. They just need to commit that last $10, right? That last mortgage payment. If they just put down that last mortgage payment, they would have, you know, quadrupled their money. The problem is they were quitters. Yeah, it's like alcoholics. Sometimes, right? They go to meetings, quitters.
Exactly.
You get the idea, yes? Because gambling, that's the whole idea behind gambling. If I just get one more, I'm about to get there. If I just...
But I think that's like it shows you like how much are you willing, like how willing are you to be free? Like how free are you willing to be? Because really, like if like especially here, like we just like confine ourselves. Because I could be like, man, I shouldn't cross right now, you know, or like I shouldn't run this red light. But it's like 1 a.m. No one's around. I'm gonna run that red light, bro. Me personally, I'm gonna run that red light. Okay, that's how free I feel. But it's like I don't know. I feel like people are free and then they don't use their freedom.
Yeah. So two things going on there. Both of them very interesting. First, I like that statement. It's how free we're willing to be. How free are you willing to be? And your freedom at some point is going to cost you because you're going to run the red light, let's say, and there's that brave, heroic cop, right, sitting in the shadows, waiting for someone to run that red light at 1 in the morning, you know, to keep the community safe. So then he pursues you, and you're like, I ain't pulling over for shit, because I'm free.
Yeah.
And then eventually they do catch up to you, and then you go to jail. So you've lost your freedom, and you might be like, see, well, your desire for freedom cost you your freedom, and you're like, nah, I chose to be here. Remember how I chose to run from you. I chose to pull over. I chose to let you cuff me rather than shoot me. So I'm here where I am because of a series of choices, and that's where freedom lies. Sometimes there are things in life that you're not allowed to do, and a lot of it has to do with this fear of consequences. I want to run from this cop, but what if I do? It's this. Yeah. So you're allowing your own conscience, or you're allowing your own choices anyway. I guess we'll say conscience, your own decision-making apparatus, to decide for you what you're willing to, how free you're willing to be. Like, think about it. It came up actually last period. We were talking about how would you behave if there were no consequences for you in life? Yeah. Imagine if you had the mask on. Like, what would you do? What would you be willing to do? Like, what right now do you have like an impulse or a desire to do? And you're like, I really want. You know what? No, I'm not going to. Or not yet. You lie to yourself with that one. That's the ultimate lie, which we'll see if we get to the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. It's this poem about a guy who wants to ask a question, and he never tells us what the question is. The poem is 131 lines of him explaining how he's about to ask a question. And spoiler alert, he never asks the question. Now we can figure out what the question is, because the poem begins, he gives us a passage from Dante's Inferno, which is about a guy who goes through hell. So we get a sense there where this person is understanding that they have to go through hell and come out on the other side. But it's a hell of his own creation. And so he begins the poem, let us go then, you and I, when evening is spread out against the sky like a patient ether eyes upon a table. Let us go through half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent. It leads us to an overwhelming question. Don't ask what is it, let us go and make our visit. So he begins his poem at the very beginning by saying, let us go then, you and I. He's speaking very highfalutinly. We get the sense that he wants to talk to somebody. And he's trying to tell this person, let us go then, you and I. Who the hell talks like this? Nobody, except a person who's wearing a mask, trying to pretend to be, someone who's pretending to be something that they're not. And then he says, let us go through certain half-deserted streets. So now we understand that this is a person who's pretending to be a wealthier class, upper class, but he's really not from there. And that's why he never has the courage to ask this question. We figure out what the question is. He wants to ask a girl out, but he never gets the courage to do it. And the whole poem, at the very, very end, he describes himself walking alone on a beach as an old man, and then he kind of like snaps out of it, and he's back at the place where this person is. He's projecting his life forward, being lonely. But the reason for it, though, is not so much a series of choices. It's a series of non-choices. Throughout the poem, he has this refrain where he says, there will be time, there will be time. And there's no worse lie from the depths of hell itself than that there will be time, there will be time. Again, he gets to the end, he never asks the question. In fact, he even projects forward to his own death. He says, I've seen myself grown slightly bald and brought in upon a platter. I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. As I've seen the greatness of my moments flicker, I've seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker. He's seen death standing at his bedside and laugh. And he says, in short, I was afraid. Which is brilliant, by the way, because most of the time people write about death and they're like Tennyson, boldly we rode and well. Like, we were not afraid of death. We charged into death. Bullshit. That's not the way it works. What happens is that the person next to you is riding boldly into death, and you're going with them. And you know why they're going with you? Because they think you're riding boldly into death. And it's a whole mass of people who've deluded themselves into thinking that everybody else is being brave. They're the only coward. No, it's a bunch of cowards who convince themselves that everybody else is brave going forward. And then they go together. And they wear this like collective mask. The point is that think about the kinds of things that we would do in life if we weren't afraid of those consequences. Think about the kinds of chances that we would take. Sure. I wonder how many of you don't raise your hand, because I'll think differently of you. I'll feel threatened. I wonder how many of you would have killed somebody by now if there were no consequence for it. I asked that last class, and people just couldn't, they're like, don't listen to the voices. Just, I wonder if you'd run somebody over at a bus stop just to see what happened. Think about that. Sometimes you get those flashes. What's that?
Every single time I drive, I'm like, maybe I can just kill this person.
Seriously, I've had friends who've told me that before, where they just sit there and they're just like, I could kill this person right now. Jeez.
You know, there's an 80% chance you get away with murder if you kill somebody random.
Yes. Yeah, most murders go unsolved if the person who gets murdered, if the murderer does not kill someone they know. Most of the time it's because you kill someone you know.
Yeah, there's motivation behind it.
Yeah, and that's
why serial killers are so cool, is because they don't have motivation.
That's why they get away with it.
Yeah, that's why they get Netflix specials. And I just get warrants. I just get interstate warrants. But I mean, seriously, if you think about that, the consequence of you doing something and the consequence of you not doing something, a lot of times are the same. Like last period, someone mentioned, so you're too afraid to ask out your crush, like Prufrock. He says there will be time, there will be time. So you never ask him out, because Prufrock never does. And so the answer basically is no, because he never even asks it. So the outcome is exactly the same, as if he asked and was rejected. Not asking is the same outcome as asking and being rejected, except for that part where, but if I ask, I'm embarrassed publicly. If you don't ask, you're embarrassed privately. I should have had the courage to try. What if? There's lots of reasons you shouldn't. Yeah, but, there's one reason you should. Experience, responsibility. Let's say you try it and the person turns you down. At least you've got a great story later. Not yet. And by the way, your friends have a funny story immediately. You might have to wait a few weeks or a few months or so to have the funny story. Well, at least your friends have a funny story immediately. But that's the thing, we fear the consequences of actions. But you're responsible for everything you do, and you're also responsible for everything that you don't do. If you go for it, you try it, and it doesn't work out, and things blow up in your face, well, okay. But but what you're dealing with, I guess, in that case is a public humiliation. In other words, between you and somebody else. And that's the thing probably that frightens us. So maybe that's the thing that we need to think about. Why am I so afraid of being embarrassed this way? Because you'll have a hard time getting through life without finding somebody who's been embarrassed in some way. And how embarrassed you are a lot of times has to do with how embarrassed you allow yourself to be. How free do you allow yourself to be? So the fear of freedom is just a fear of assuming responsibility. We don't want to be free because we don't want the consequences. But once you can embrace the consequences of it, and by the way, find out that that's what makes life worth living. I know I've asked a million times before, but have you guys played games? Video games? So if you ever play, guys, what NPCs are.
No.
The NPC does what it does because it's pre-programmed. It doesn't make decisions. It just kind of walks up to you on the street and goes, hi, because it's been programmed to do that. But anybody, when you're playing the video game, who's the important character?
Main character.
You, main character, because that's the only one who's making choices for themselves. Everybody else is making a choice that they've been programmed to do. If you live your whole life being afraid of the consequences and therefore allowing other people, I hate saying it, it sounds so cliche, but it is true, allowing like society to determine your morals, allowing society to determine what you should and shouldn't do, allowing parents to decide for you, allowing friends to decide for you. It's not that those things shouldn't influence you. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying, bring the whole thing down. I'm saying they should have influences on you, probably. But if you're allowing those things to determine for you, you're an NPC who's just walking around waving at the main character, whoever that might be in your life. We understand that the main character in your own life should be you. And so you have to embrace the consequences of it. By the way, embrace the consequences no matter what they are. No matter what they are. There's a concept called amor fati. I'll write it down because it's really important. It means love of fate. To embrace it. And it's not just like accept your fate in a very stoic way, like this is the way things are. No, it means to actually love your fate. To love what happens to you. Love the place that you are. Love your life exactly as it is. With all of its challenges, all of its difficulties, all of its struggles, all of its hardships, all of its depression and anxiety. Oh, by the way, all of its excitement, all of its exuberance, all of its risk-taking, all of it, everything in its totality. To love the fate that you have. To love it. Not to accept it, but to love it. And that means, therefore, even to love the consequences of something. You try something, it blows up in your face. All right, screw it. And it's not like a, screw it, you only live once. It is a, you only live once, but that means to pack as much into it as possible. Because you never know. What if? What if? You understand you're going to die, yes?
Yeah.
So what are you afraid of? What if? What if you open up your business and it fails? Ooh, I'm bankrupt. You're going to die. What are you worried about? What if I take this risk out and move to New York or whatever? Oh yeah, you're going to die. You move to New York. Whatever it is. Exactly, they're rats. But you've accepted the fact that you're going to die. So maybe embrace the possibilities that understanding can bring you. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Friday, huh?